everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Talking Acquisition. This is the weekly high-energy, informative, and slightly opinionated view on all things acquisition, procurement, and government contracting related. This is the place where the contracting and acquisition communities and our industry partners connect, talk, listen, and learn from each other. My name is William Randolph, and I'm your host, and I'd like to introduce my co-host, my colleague, my partner, my friend, Soraya Carrera. Hello, Soraya. How you doing?
So, Will, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Wonderful, wonderful. How was your week?
It's been good, quite busy, but good. You know, the new year is coming with a lot of new tasks and new activities. And of course, this Omicron virus has people a little nervous.
Yeah, shaking things up a little bit.
Yeah, things are moving around a little bit on the calendar, but we're good to go. And our podcast happens every week, no matter what.
Right? No matter what.
That's right. We're like the postal service, man. No rain, no snow, nothing stops us.
That's right. No matter what. So with that, you want to dive in?
Let's dive in. I'm going to do my disclaimer here, and then we'll jump into this week's topic. Okay?
Okay, let's do it.
All right. So our podcast shares information and views on a variety of topics that impact the federal acquisition community. Our goal is to provide thought leadership and perspective, not to criticize, judge, or render political opinions, although a few of those might slip out. We provide this free service because we are former federal acquisition professionals and leaders. We believe that the creativity, innovation, and effectiveness of our community is unleashed when we share knowledge, information, and learning. We hope you enjoy the podcast, and we welcome the views and comments of our colleagues across the private and public sectors. And with that, Will, this week's topic, you know, the last topic we had, we touched on this, market research and the use of the RFI. And I thought what we do today is talk a little bit about first, what is the purpose of market research, right? Why do we do that? Why do we engage in market research and how it impacts both government and industry? And then the use of the RFI. That's the very popular tool that's used to do market research. Because obviously there's two forms of market research. There's the one you can do on your own, going on the internet or whatever, and looking at whatever sources. And then there's the RFI where you're actually engaging with industry to get information from that. So I thought, and the RFI, I should say, is the request for information for any folks coming into the business that don't know that. So let's talk a little bit about market research. So I'll open the floor to you.
Okay, so market research, I am always a believer, I use this analogy that requirements, that when requirements are quote unquote matured in the program offices or inside of government, they still look like symbolic Swiss cheese. They still have some holes in it, okay? And market research is really designed, in my opinion, to help fill the holes. The more you fill the holes, the less industry has to guess. The less industry has to guess, the less they have to make up. And the less they have to make up, the better your pricing, the better your solutions, because they aren't building the risk of the unknown in. So I'm just a huge fan of market research in whatever form it's necessary to fill the holes in the Swiss cheese. As you said, the RFI tends to be the one that is used. And so my first thought is there's also another tool called the sources sought notification. And one of the things that I have seen is that they are used synonymous. They are not synonymous. They are two different and distinct things. The RFI informs. When the government uses the RFI, the government is looking to fill holes in the Swiss cheese. They should have questions. They should have things they're asking you to think about and look at when they're using the RFI. The sources sought identifies. They want to know the number of players, maybe the socioeconomic categories that those players live in, how large, how small, how many, geographical area. The sources sought informs, the sources sought really identifies who the participants are in the universe that the government is seeking to do business in.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I'm glad you brought up the sources sought, because I was thinking about that. You can do a sources sought and RFI together. But
yes,
you have to distinguish between what the two activities are. Because sometimes people will answer the sources sought and have nothing to offer on the RFI.
Absolutely.
Or you always answer the sources sought.
Yeah.
You don't have to answer the RFI. But I want to get into a little bit of the RFI. Sources sought, I agree with you, is traditionally to find out who the players are in the market, where they're located, their socioeconomic status, and anything else you want to know about that particular industry. That's really what that's for. You're really trying to understand the base, your industrial base in that particular commodity or service that you're trying to buy. And certainly there are a lot of sources, industry will say, well, don't they have lists out there? But what you're really trying to find is those companies that may not otherwise do business with the federal government. Because we in the federal government are not just interested, as much as people don't believe this, we're not always interested in doing business with the same companies. We do want to see the other entrants in the market. We do want to see what's available out there in terms of across the country. And the sources sought is a great way of identifying those kinds of companies. And if you know you're looking for hub zone companies or you're looking for 8As, right? Be clear about that in your sources sought. Say, we're interested in hearing what 8A companies are out there or what companies are located in hub zones that provide this particular service. There's nothing wrong with that. And yes, you should still search all the government databases because you might find companies that you don't normally do business with,
right?
Because some companies are out there that have never even talked to your particular agency. So definitely a fan of the sources sought. But I think I did probably one of the first, I'm older than dirt, so I've been around for a while. So I probably did one of the first RFIs. And I always, when I was a contracting officer, whenever I put out an RFI, generally speaking, you want comments, right? Usually you're going to try to put out like a draft statement of work and other materials. I always tailored my RFIs to, first of all, ask a series of questions, no more than in the range of 5 to 10 questions. And one of those questions could be related to sources sought. Right? I want to know about your company. I want to know if you're small, you're large, would you be interested, blah, 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 blah. So I always targeted specific questions. That way, if I didn't get comments on the materials that I provided, at least I got them to think about what I want them to think about, right?
Yeah.
Or I got them to give me the information that I want. And all too often, what I'm seeing is people do put out draft RFPs or draft statements of work, which, by the way, I have a comment about that. But anyway, draft RFPs, draft statements of work, and they're not asking specific questions. And then they're disappointed when they get like 3,000 comments, and then they got to sort through these comments.
Yeah.
And part of the reason you get 3,000 comments because the industry doesn't know what you want. They don't know what you're asking them, right? You just gave them a statement of work, and they're going to go, they're going to go in and try to make sure that you've answered the questions that they have so that they can figure out how they're going to bid this thing or whether or not they're even going to bid this thing. So a couple of comments on the RFI and providing attachments. I'm all for providing attachments, but if I had to give advice to a contracting officer, I'd say, lay out the questions that you want answered. Ask them specifics. Point them to what you want them to look at in that draft RFP, draft statement of work. By the way, if you're going to put out just a draft statement of work, it's nice. It's good. I'm not going to knock it. However, talk to any industry official out there and they're going to say, I want to see the eval criteria with that statement of work. Because the statement of work doesn't really tell them whether or not they want to compete in this.
What's important?
They want to know the basics. How are you going to look at them? What are you going to evaluate? What are you thinking about? What are you looking for? The eval criteria is what really tells you that. That's what really tells you where you're aiming. So I always recommend getting the eval criteria out there. And for God's sake, I'm sorry, I have to say this. Do not tell me technical management and price. We know that.
Yeah.
Let us not do that.
Yeah.
Let's get another level down. What in technical? What in management are you interested in? What are you looking for? Do you have a pricing schedule? Do you think you know how you're going to look at prices or how you're going to ask them to price it? Get down to a little bit specifics because technical management and prices in every solicitation. In fact, when people used to come and brief me and they go, yeah, our eval criteria is going to be technical management price, I used to just drop the pen. I was like, oh, shoot me now, right? Because I know that one. We wrote the book on that. We got that down. All we do is move them around, right? Oh, excuse me, I forgot. Past performance and experience, right? They're in there somewhere. Somewhere in there we fit them, right? I forgot the fourth criteria. So anyway, but all we do is move those around, but they're always the same title. let's be unique. Let's be different. Are you going to do something different? Are you thinking about a technical challenge? Right? That's a great question to ask industry, to say, we're thinking about using a technical challenge. What would you do? That pinpoints them and gets them thinking and gives you good information. But if you just throw out a statement of work and eval criteria, what I've often seen is you get thousands of comments, and sometimes a lot of them are repetitive, or you can't do anything with them.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because
That's fair.
now you have questions, right? And that's not
Exactly.
industry's fault. By the way, I'm
Yeah.
not blaming industry for that. If you don't point them in the right direction, they don't have anything else to do. They want to be responsive. Some companies actually believe that if they don't respond to an RFI, they'll be eliminated from the competition, which is not true. But there are companies out there that really think that. They think that
Yeah.
they got to put a lot of energy and resources towards it. And they do. They do put a lot of time and energy in looking at these drafts. So the more that we can narrow it down, focus it, make sure we're asking the right questions or telling them what we see. And then the follow-up. I'm sorry. You put out an RFI, tell them the purpose, and then tell them what you're going to do with that information. And then when you get the response, it doesn't cost much to put out a blanket thank you. We've got your comments. You will hear from us in a month, a quarter, a year, something. Don't let it be a black hole. I can't tell how many times companies came to me and said, "Oh my God, it's like a black hole out there."
Yeah.
So, anyway, I'll shut up.
No, you're spot on. So I'm just gonna pick up where you left off, talking about the black hole, because that's one that is real to me, and I see it so much now that I'm on the other side, that it's literally a black hole. And here's the reasoning behind the black hole.
Mhm.
When a company, at least in my experiences and with some of the clients that I work with, when a company is thinking about their solutioning and leaning in, they're taking bits and pieces of information and they're creating a picture. And in that picture, they're leaning in and starting to trying to think about the piece parts that are going to be leaning into that solution. The last time that they have a conversation or there's an exchange of information is the RFI, tends to be before the RFP drops or a very mature draft. In that time frame, that black hole, they're all putting things together. They're like identifying people, identifying partners, people that they may be thinking about putting together. They're all doing stuff. And when I was in government, I really didn't have a sense of how much leaning forward industry does in these areas where we think, look, there's nothing to do, go sit down and be quiet. We'll come back and talk to you later. But companies are doing things. And if they're doing things on the data or the questions or the ideas that were identified in the RFI, if they change significantly, and thankfully we learned something. Hopefully the government learned something. But if it changes significantly and we don't tell them, they're all building A when we're thinking about, we learned something in the RFI, now we want B. And that is just time and energy just lost without saying, thank you for the responses. We got some great info. We were thinking about this. Now we're thinking about this. Be on the lookout for the draft, so that you can say, they learned something. They heard us. Okay. And then there's an opportunity to vector toward actually and putting resources on the solution that is closer to what the government will ultimately be asking for.
No, and you raise a valid point. That is exactly right. Industry starts putting together its ideas about how it's going to respond, who they're going to work with, et cetera. That is a very accurate statement. I've heard that from industry time and time again when I was in government. Yeah. But here's what I think bothers me most is that for some reason in government, there is this thought process that, we can only talk in RFI or in RFP. No, we can talk at any time we want. And in fact, one of the things that I used to try to encourage folks to do, and I know we get busy, right? I think I've said this before. I never worked in an overstaffed procurement office, right? Sure. It wasn't like you didn't have an abundance of things to do and you weren't always under the gun. But take the time to not only respond and say, thank you, got your comments. We look to follow up with you by X, because when you first get your comments, you're probably not even going to know what you're going to do, right? Sure. You still got to sort through the comments, figure out what's the duplicates and where there's real meaningful comments versus nitnoids. So first give them an idea of when you're going to get back to them. And by the way, if you don't meet that date, if you still don't have all the answers, give them what you got.
Yeah,
Give them what you
absolutely.
got and say,
Yeah,
hey, we got a lot of really good information in this area, this area, this area. We think we're going to change the whole thing. Or this is probably going to stay pretty much the same, a few
yes,
editorials. Here's where we're really revisiting our strategy. That immediately drops a hint to industry that
yes,
they're going to pivot here.
yes.
The other reason for telling them that is because one of my favorite things, and I used to say this all the time, if you ever want to find out what's really going on, start a rumor. Just make it up. And I'm just being honest. I think some of
That's
our
hilarious.
partners out there do that. They'll call up and go, hey, Soraya, I heard that y'all are going to go sole source to Papa Joe and Frank. And I'm like, how the hell did you get that, right? I think people make up rumors because that's a way of getting you to go, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do X, right? So people will make it up, and that's how rumors actually get started. Because I do think there are some clever folks who go out there. Well, I'll just plant a seed and see if I get them to tell me something. So I mean, I would do that. I'm telling you, I just would do that. So it's really important that the government be honest about where they're thinking about pivoting. And by the way, you can even do that in the RFI. You can say, we are contemplating this strategy, but we're also considering this and this.
Yes.
That's good. And we'd like to hear your feedback on it. In fact, I think that's a great idea to go and say, I'm really thinking about out now buying this software, but maybe I'm willing to buy it as software as a service, or I'm willing to just, buy services and not even buy the software. Whatever it is that you're thinking. I think that is extremely important to share with industry. If you're not locked in on a strategy and you're debating within your own mind what that strategy should be, share that with them and let them give you feedback on that. So the RFI is extremely important. I think having a timeline with the RFI, not only a timeline for this market research period, because that's what I call that whole time that you're doing your RFI. It is really about understanding the market and learning what's out there and who does it. But not only a timeline for that, but then your timeline for the RFP, and be honest about when it moves. Industry knows that everything is not going to stay pristine and perfect, that plan is a 4-letter word, and that means that something's going to change on you. Okay, that's what plan actually means. This is what I think I'm going to do. This is what's really going to happen. That's called reality. Plan is what I'm thinking, right? So I think it's fair to say to industry, here's what we think. And the more precise you can be about your schedule, the better that is for industry, because it helps them plan. Because here's the other thing that industry is looking at. They're not looking at just the opportunity that you put in front of them. They're looking at 10 or 15 other opportunities that might be out there. And I might be exaggerating that, but they are looking at other opportunities, and they may decide you're taking too long. I'm going to focus over here.
Right.
And they do look at probability to win. The PW.
Yeah, people.
And if that is not there for them, in other words, if that's a real risky one, they might go for this other more for sure thing. So I think it's extremely important to share that timeline, because that starts to tell you who your players are really going to be. It starts to tell them how serious you are about the procurement. By the way, how you ask your questions in the RFI and how you craft that draft RFP and eval criteria tells industry a lot about competition you seek.
Absolutely. So Soraya, I'm going to add one more thought on the parts, a part of the RFI that I fear is still being missed. I remember when I was in government, one of the things I always wanted to do is make sure we start bringing the RFP down the funnel of the source. I mean, the requirement down the funnel of the source selection. You at the beginning, you play with everybody, or however you define your universe, but you want to start separating the wheat from the chaff early, so you don't have 20 proposals to evaluate at the end. That's not efficient. Okay, and one of the ways to do that in the market research phase is to add into your language that follow-on market research activities may be defined by the participants in the original RFI.
Yes.
Okay. So that if you see something that you're interested in, you have telegraphed that you may reach out individually and
Right.
say, tell me more about this X, Y, and Z. I remember my first lesson, I'll call it a lesson, when I was an intern doing my first source selection. And my contracting officer I was working for at the time said, most protests are lodged and sustained for inconsistency.
Yep.
We say one thing and we do something else. So if you want to jump the hurdle, say what you're going to do, the success hurdle, say what you're going to do, and then do exactly what you said you were going to do. It might be a bad plan, but people you don't get protests for bad plans or
Yeah.
sub-optimized strategies. You don't get protested for those.
Right. Yeah.
You get protested for inconsistencies. So
True.
I think if individuals are concerned about elongating the market research phase and having the latitude to talk to people, to continue the conversation, make sure you say early on that other activities, and you don't have to define what the activities are. As soon as you say it's a market research activity, your statement has covered those activities if you want to dive in. Because the thing I've noticed is if a company has the secret sauce, they
Mhm.
will not share it.
Nope.
They will not share it in an RFI, and
Oh, no.
specifically because the government will put that statement in there that says, "Do not share anything proprietary. You know, that may be safe. You know, it's not safe. It's not procurement sensitive." I'm like, well, you just guaranteed yourself not to get the secret sauce.
Yep.
So I would encourage people to think about, especially our government family, to
Mhm.
think about making sure you grant yourself the latitude to do other market research activities with the original set of individuals that participated. You start winnowing the groups down, and it allows you to dive in and perhaps either in some fashion get to the secret sauce.
Yeah, I would also argue that you never lock yourself out until you're ready to issue the final RFP.
Fair enough.
I agree
Yes.
with you. You can keep talking to industry, host meetings, you can have one-on-ones, and you're right about the secret sauce. Most savvy industry individuals are not going to put not true proprietary data. What I
Right.
mean, like you said, the secret sauce, that solution, or what they're thinking about that solution, they're not going to just drop it in open comments where you might actually publish the comment. We never reveal the source, but we could publish the comment, right?
Yes.
Or publish a response to a question that reveals a comment.
Right. That shifts the requirement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So industry is very careful about that. I do want to touch on something that you said. And of course, it flew right out of my head because, getting older, you forget things. But so a couple of things about the market research and getting to that final RFP that everybody has to remember. It ain't final till it's final. From an industry and government perspective, all of it is talk and chatter. So you get to that final RFP, and you
Yes.
always remind people of that. We're just talking, we're thinking out loud, we're having a conversation. It's what the RFP says that's going to rule the day. And the government has to remember that, and so does industry.
Yes.
That if it isn't in that RFP, if it isn't like documented in that RFP, go back and ask that question if you think it's going to affect your bid, because if it isn't in there, it's probably not going to apply. And that's what the courts are going to hold you to. That's what the that's what the evaluators have to follow, and that's what the courts are going to hold you to. So what you said is true. What we say has to mirror what we do in that RFP and how we evaluate and how we make award. And one of the things that I often like to try to tell industry is what I know about my procurement. Tell them the history.
Sure.
If the history has validity in what you're trying to do in the future, in other words, it helps to understand what you're doing in the future, tell the history of the procurement. Don't be afraid to tell them what you did before, including where you might have done it wrong. Right?
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
things didn't work. I think it's extremely important. The more information that you give industry, the better informed that they are. Two things will happen. Number one, they will self-select themselves out. I say that all the time. Industry doesn't want to jump on something that they cannot win.
Absolutely.
That's not that, it's
That's not the business model.
It's not the business model. Yeah. I want to go bid on something that I can waste my money and not win, right?
Yeah.
They want to bid on things that they think they have a good probability of winning. And they define good, right? But
Absolutely.
to do that, the more information they have, the better informed they are. By the way, when I was a contracting officer and as chief procurement officer, I always said, I don't want people who are going to lose. I really don't. I don't want people to spend a lot of time and money pursuing an opportunity that they just cannot win. Let's
Absolutely.
help industry understand what we're trying to do, why we're trying to do it, and what we're looking for so that they have a high probability. I want great proposals. I used to tell this all the time to my staff. I used to go, I would rather have 5 great proposals where I have to pull my hair out to figure out which
Yes.
one I want to pick than to have 10 crappy ones trying to pick, the cream of the crap, as I used to
Yep.
call it.
Oh my.
Oh yeah, you never heard that one from me. I said that about applicants too. Don't bring me 5 applicants. Bring me the top 3. I want the cream of the crop, not the cream of the crap. I'm serious,
Right.
man.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
I feel,
That's true.
and I feel that way about the bidding process. That if you're truly looking for value, best value, and you're really looking for the best, then you really want 5 great proposals. I want that source selection authority, that evaluation team. The dilemma I want them to have is, which one do I pick? They're
Right.
all great. That
Absolutely.
is the best answer you can have, because
Absolutely.
then you have a good solicitation, a solid requirement that was very well defined, and you're probably going to have a successful procurement.
Good stuff.
Which jumps us into contract administration, but I won't go there. My favorite, I'll set the stage for one of our future topics on debriefing. One of my favorite things that I always wanted to say to companies in debriefing, and I had the opportunity to do it a couple of times, is to say, it isn't that you didn't win. Excuse me. It isn't that you lost. You didn't win.
Right.
What that means is you had a great proposal. There was just someone that had one a little bit better than you.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the right answer. If I tell you you lost, that means probably
you lost.
You lost.
Agreed.
You didn't have a good proposal.
Yeah.
So, and I always thought about it in that way, that I always welcomed the opportunity to sit down with a company. Welcome the opportunity sounds like wrong, but to say to them, look, it wasn't that you lost. It's just that you didn't win. They had something better than you, right? We had to pick, and here's how we evaluated, and here's where they came out, and here's where you came out. But the reality is, you were right there in the running. That's good information for a company to understand. It's good for them to understand why the other guy beat them, like what was the differentiator, but important for them to understand whether or not they had a really good proposal or they had a really bad proposal. And in fact, one of the things that I used to always do is also debrief the winner.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell the winner.
That's the best.
Yeah, your part wasn't perfect either, right?
Right.
You might have had some things that you need to fix, because that's going to impact contract admin. But that kind of digresses a little bit, but it does go back to that original marketing plan and making sure that you're drawing in the best, because that's really what you're trying to do. And we don't want industry wasting money. I know that sometimes it doesn't feel that way, but it really, we're not interested in having a lot of competition. We're interested in having good competition. Real competition.
I agree. Yeah, the government always ends up paying, whether they win or lose. The government always ends up paying. Those dollars find their way to a contract, to a billable contract somewhere.
Yeah, you want real competition, and you want good competition.
Yeah,
that's what you really want, because that also tells you a lot about the industry, and it also tells you what your alternatives are if something goes wrong. Because you do learn a lot when you get these solicitations out there about who's out there and who are the real players.
Who are the players?
So market research, extremely important. I know you're going to tell me we're coming to our time.
We're at that time.
Yeah.
This was a good one. This is high energy.
Yeah, this was good. No, this is one of my favorite. I've always loved the topic of market research. So a couple of things on market research for the government side. Extremely important that you do a good job on your market research, that you really think about what you know about the industry, the capabilities, the product or service that you're trying to buy, and that you do your homework on it. Skipping that step can cost you a lot later. If you're going to use the RFI, prepare 5 to 10 questions that you want to target industry to talk to you, or point them to parts of the RFP, whether they're eval criteria or parts of the statement of work or a combination of both, that you really want them to hone in on. The more precise you are with industry on what you're looking for from them, the better the feedback that you're going to get. And then always provide feedback to industry. Give them the timeline for your marketing, give them the timeline for your procurement, and then follow up. If you're going to be delayed, tell them, hey, we're delayed. That's what FedBizOps is there for. It's a great tool to communicate. So I know I gave you 3 nuggets in one, but those are my nuggets.
Sounds good. And my nuggets are going to be industries. I'm going to put my nuggets toward industry. 1, stick to your knitting. Okay, don't try to do everything for everybody. Okay, if this is an RFI and you think you have the
knitting, I'm very concerned about you, but we'll talk about that in another podcast.
But stick to your knitting. The thing that you can do, make sure you can deliver in the space, and don't try to just string a solution up or just string a RFI together or RFI response just to get your name in the hat. Don't waste anyone's time. Okay, stick to your knitting. And number 2, always offer to have the follow-on one-on-one. Okay, offer, whether the government accepts the offer or not, grant them the authority to please come and talk. If you see something in our RFI that is intriguing, we would welcome the opportunity to come in, hop on a Zoom, hop on a Teams, whatever that is, and talk more about and get to the secret sauce in a one-on-one environment. That's where the magic is. That's where the magic is.
Hey, you reminded me of something that I wanted to give an example just for our industry friends. There was a particular RFP that we did, draft RFP that we did a few years back, and a particular company that we thought would bid decided that they weren't going to pursue it. They said, we're not interested in this. However, we're going to offer you some comments, and we welcome the opportunity to come and talk to you one-on-one and share with you our views, but we are not interested in bidding. We're not going to bid because we're pursuing something else. It had nothing to do with the RFP itself. It had to do with the fact that they just didn't want to spread
capacity.
themselves.
Yeah.
But they were one of the big players that we were expecting in the game. Yeah. And they said, we want to come in and talk to you and tell you what we think and share some ideas, but we're not going to play. Those are valuable comments too.
Absolutely.
Especially if you know
Absolutely.
their business. So industry is actually all prepared to help. Really, they want to help the government. And you're right, stick to your knitting. I never thought about it as knitting. but Will, your analogies. I got Swiss cheese. You a little hungry this morning? I'm just kidding.
and with that, Soraya, we're out. We're out. Thank you so very much. Amazing topic. I'm glad you brought this one to the table. Amazing topic, high energy. I think there are some nuggets in there on both sides of the table. I'm looking forward to our next episode.
Yes, I am too. Will, thank you very much. As always, you give me something to think about. I'm going to go get a piece of Swiss cheese. All kidding aside, thanks again. It's always a pleasure. And for our industry and government partners, if you have any questions or have any comments, any thoughts you want to share, please feel free to do so. Will and I are here to talk to you.
All the best. Awesome. All the best. Take care. Bye-bye.